This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I'm Chris Mintliff, and Philippe Touzot is back with us. And Philippe, an interesting conversation today around price strategies and optimizing pricing and price strategies. So this is, for me, like one of the most interesting and important conversations we can have, especially in small and mid-market, because price, we can think so myopically about price. Just, can we close the business? And so therefore or I'm thinking about the sales rep who is trying to hit quota and so is willing to, make the deal that isn't a very good deal because, well, it'll probably lead to more business down the road, or all of these things that often don't work out. So let's unpack this today. I'm really interested in your, and obviously we've got products and a little bit more sort of hard pricing, things like that. But when we're thinking about pricing strategies, where do we start? Where do we start if we're going to try to optimize? What do we need to back up until we are at? Where's that starting point for us?
Yep, good question. So thank you, Chris, for having me today and looking forward to our conversation. And I agree with you, by the way. I do find this topic absolutely fascinating. There's no question that, pricing is always going to be of paramount importance to all businesses. And whether or not a business will be successful will largely depend on their pricing strategies. And at the same time, when you think about it, yes, there are some businesses that have a very, very good grasp of pricing strategies and developed a great expertise in this area and have really mastered all aspects of their pricing. But I think it's fair to say that for the majority of businesses out there, that's probably not the case. And you get the sense that with a little bit more expertise and better understanding in this area, that businesses could unlock more potential for their business. So that's why I find this topic absolutely fascinating. So to answer your question in terms of where do we get started, I would say four things. The first thing is to clearly articulate the value of the product, whatever it is that we're selling, what makes it unique compared to the competitors, and really articulate this very clearly, because this will relate to the notion of value, and we'll come back to that. That will be underpinning the pricing strategy. So that's the first thing that's super important. After that, I would say get a very clear understanding of the costs that are incurred to produce the product or the services, right? So all the costs, direct expenses, indirect expenses, use whichever cost accounting methodology is relevant for that. Maybe something more elaborate like activity-based costing, but get a clear understanding of those costs, because without that, you're going to be flying blind, obviously. So pretty obvious, but that's a step that cannot be skipped. After that, I would say get all the information about the competitors. Pricing is very much about the next best alternative that customers and clients have. So the question here is, okay, if your products or services were not there, where would the customers go? What would they buy, and for how much? And just keep track of all your competitors' pricing. And that tends to change. So just make sure you keep updated information there. For example, large hotel chains, every day they will check their competitors' prices. So you can imagine the kind of databases that they will accumulate over time. And then last but not least, I would say do a good client segmentation, because in pricing, there's no one size fits all, or there shouldn't be a one size fits all proposition, because people want different things, have different needs, have different preferences, maybe have different budgets, or have a different sensitivity to price. So having that segmentation across your client base, your customer base, and maybe expanding to potential clients, those that are not your clients or your customers yet, but that you're targeting, and try to include them in your segmentation. having that information will be really helpful when it gets to finalizing the pricing strategy.
Wow. That's like a masterclass right there. I hope everybody wrote down your 4 bullet points, or rewind it if you didn't so that you can. Let me first of all say thanks for bringing marketing right into the conversation at the start when you're talking about, so like, what's the value of this thing and how are you going to tell that story? I think that's fascinating that is a component of pricing, and I want to get into that. But I loved one of these other things that you said, which is, what are your competitors doing? What's the pricing of that? I think, don't know what you think, that as general broad strokes, a lot of companies, it is chronic, it is epidemic that you are pricing too low, almost out of a defensiveness, like you're afraid that you won't win the business if you're a little bit too expensive. What do you think about the idea that often the alternative isn't a competitor, it's the status quo, it's doing nothing? And that if you are involving yourself in the conversation, the sales discussion, the research with somebody that you're liking, that investment is paying off some dividends early, even before you buy something. So that if you and I are having a great relationship here, Philippe, and then I say it's $5 and you say, I think you really get me, Chris, but $5, I think I can go down the street and get it for $4.25. But you got to start that whole conversation brand new and get a new feel for if this is the right thing. How often is it that we're getting in our way because we haven't understood the value of that connection with our customer versus just how much does it cost, and will people be afraid of that? Is my question? I'm not even sure, and that's on me. But
No,
the question
that is a great point. And it all comes down to really believing in the value of your product and of your services. But it's not just believing, it's because at the end of the day, it's the perceived value, right?
Yes,
it's not what you believe, it's what the customer or client will see in their own eyes, right? That's really what we're trying to pin here, is the perceived worth that a customer will assign to the product or to the services based on its features, its quality, perhaps a brand reputation, and how it meets his or her needs and preferences. And once you've really identified that, it's setting the price that captures that value. And obviously, yes, in some cases, we tend to compare our products or services to competitors' products, which are going to be different, not necessarily as good as ours. So in some cases, yes, we tend to maybe be tempted at following the competitors and turning into a price war. But usually that's not where you want to go. You really want to, leave the discussion around value. And actually, maybe that's a segue into a misconception around pricing, because the concept of value is what should be underpinning all pricing strategies, but that's not often what we see. What we see instead are pricing strategies that are tied to the cost, yes. Right? So we were talking about the cost at the beginning, and in many cases, that's what we see. There's the cost, and then there's some kind of a markup that's applied to that. And that, I'll give you 2 examples to illustrate this point, that cost and price are not only just 2 different dollar numbers, they're 2 different concepts, 2 different things. So let's take an example. Let's take a can of Coke or a can of Pepsi, depending on your preferences. So you go to your local supermarket, you buy a pack of 12, and the cans probably can come in at about 60 cents a can. You go to the vending machine, you're probably going to pay $1.50, $1.75. You go to a concert or to a high-profile sporting event, you're probably going to pay more like $5. You're in your hotel room, and if you grab a can of Coke from the mini bar, it's probably going to be more like $8 or $9, right? Now, the cost to produce the can of Coke didn't change. It's the same. But what you have here are completely different situations, different settings, different circumstances, possibly different people. And the value that's attached to the product in each of those settings is significantly different. So that's just illustrate this idea that the cost and the price are just two different things. But all too often, that's not what we see. We see this correlation that one way or another is set. I'll give you another example that might be even more powerful, and that's the people in the street sellers that sell umbrellas, right? And so there's a price that is set, and as soon as it looks like it might rain, right? You got dark clouds rolling in, or maybe it starts raining, prices double.
Surge
right?
pricing. It's like over for umbrellas.
Exactly. Now, again, the cost to produce the umbrella didn't change, but certainly an umbrella is a lot more valuable at that moment, because the alternative is you're going to get wet, or you're going to have to walk, a few blocks to the nearest store to buy yourself an umbrella. So again, it comes back to the notion of value in a given situation. That's what should be underpinning the pricing strategy.
This is I love this conversation, and I already feel like, Philippe, we're going to need like 6 more sort of episodes to unpack a lot of things. But one of the things that you're sharing that really connects with me is there's a psychological event around what and when we buy a thing. So if I'm at a vending machine and I see that the Coke is $8, I'm not just like surprised, I'm appalled, and I'm going to go downstairs and tell everybody, did you see what's happening at the vending machine? But when I'm at a hotel, $8. I understand. I expect it. It's what I'm used to. If I'm at the ball game, my hot dog is $13. And if I run over to the gas station, it's $1.25. Like it's, as you said, same situation, same product, but the experience is different, and I will make allowances in one way or another, or I will not in one way or another, depending on that circumstance. So one thing that we can't necessarily quickly have dynamics around is this psychology. But what I hear you say is you need to understand that exists, that is a thing that you have to sort of contend with as you're thinking about pricing strategies. How do I do that while also keeping the nuts and bolts in mind of like, we should probably aim for whatever, 35% margins, and maybe just explain that concept of margins to us just a little bit as you sit with it. But how do we weigh these different pieces? Because it can be really easy to take our eyes off of one thing and focus just on another. And now our pricing strategy becomes this sort of ethereal, cosmic thing. And we're not making headway like we need to on, are we doing the right thing pricing everybody so our revenue is equaling profit somewhere down the road?
So the idea here, what you were referring to, is that at the end of the day, different people are ready and willing to pay different amounts for the same thing. It's just the way it is, right? And you see that in many different situations. A flight, right? In the same class of service, everybody's going to pay a different price. So the goal here is the people that are willing to pay the highest price, that's what you want. And you don't want to offer a lower price to those people. If they're willing to pay a certain amount, you're not going to put a lower price on the table. But at the same time, you also want to capture those other folks which are more price sensitive. And if you have a really targeted strategy for those people and those people only to offer what you're selling at a lower price, then you give them a chance to take that offer, which brings you another customer, which you may not have had otherwise. And that it's the idea behind say coupons, for example, right? Not everybody's going to go out and collect coupons and carry them around and bring them to the store. Same thing with mail-in rebates, right? You're going to do a promotional campaign that includes mail-in rebates, which will make a product more attractive. But the reality is not everybody's going to take care of the mail-in rebates. I think the statistics is like 50% of the rebates don't get claimed. So it's the same idea with student discount or discounts that are given to senior citizens. So the discount is tied to certain situations, certain people only, and the other folks, are willing and happy to pay the full price. Maybe we can give another example. Is when you have say that you're dealing with difficult market situations. Maybe it's a recession. Maybe there's a new competitor coming in, and you're losing market shares. You've lost perhaps 15% of your customers, and they have gone to cheaper products or cheaper offerings, or they've just gone out entirely. Rather than look at a price reduction across the board that would apply to the 85% that are still there, that are still buying the product at the same price. One idea here is to come up with an alternative offering, maybe a pared down version, something that is maybe in a simpler version that can justify a price reduction, and offer that for a lower price. That will potentially bring those customers back in, because now you have a new offering with a new competitive pricing. But at the same time, you did not devalue your original product. The people that are paying for the full price, that 85%, that product is still there. So that's another way to expand your customer base. In my example, to react to a particular market situation without devaluing your product. One of the biggest challenges around discounting is doing it without devaluing your product. Because if you put a discount out there that's open-ended, that's broad, that's not attached to anything in particular, you've essentially devalued the product. Everybody's gonna want that discount. Of course, they're gonna take it. You're gonna have a really hard time reestablishing the value and putting the price back to where it was. So the key here is to do it in a way that does not devalue your original pricing.
You know, you're talking about, as you talk about segments, that's a segment I call the transactional customer, who is more concerned with anything else of saving the most or spending the least. And that customer has characteristics that are very price driven. And so if you start to design your pricing to be most attractive to them, you will find yourself having to constantly cut your prices because they will leave for the next cheapest thing. That's who you're. So I love this idea of caution around, be thoughtful about what you're offering to whom. So one of the sort of takeaways that you're sharing for me is diversify your products and services a little bit. So have a starter version. There's also, and I like how you kind of framed that around maybe in response to something dynamic. So it's more of a defensive move. But do you think it can also be an offensive move in that there's a halo effect? So start with us here, but look at what else we can do for you. And here's the next thing you could buy. Or if you liked that, you're going to love these new features in the next model up. How do we start to frame pricing in relationship to diversity of products in that way?
Well, I think it goes back to the idea of offering multiple options. And by the way, that's a strategy that is very widely used, but I think it could be used in more situations. There's a lot of businesses that for a reason or another are not applying that idea, right? So rather than a single offering at a single price point, have 3 or 4. 3 seems to be the magic number, right? The old bronze, silver, gold, or silver, gold, platinum, or good, better, best, right? So, that opens up potentially new opportunities, because essentially by doing that, and to answer your question, maybe if you're on the offense, you can maybe offer a new product or a new set of services that's on the high end at a higher price point. That's like the deluxe version, or the very best possible version of your product. But it revolves around that same idea of multiple options. And there's a lot of benefits to that strategy. The number one, obviously, because again, people want different things and have different needs, you're going to be covering a broader range of customers and clients. So that's the first benefit. The second benefit is from a financial standpoint. Usually, as you go up in your range, those are the offerings that carry a higher margin. right? So as you're able to move the needle towards the gold or the platinum or the best option, those are usually the products and the services that will yield the highest margin for your activities. Another benefit of that approach was a little bit more subtle, is that by doing that, as opposed to a single offering for a single price point, you're actually moving the needle towards value. Again, back to this idea of value, because what's happening here is the client says, you know what, option B looks really good for me because I get this, I get that, compared to option A. I'm not quite ready for option C. That's a little too expensive, but option B, from a value standpoint, that looks like a great deal. It's almost like you get the inner chatter going towards value considerations. Whereas if you have a single offering for a single price point, sooner or later, it's probably going to be more about the dollars and the cents and comparisons to a competitor and potentially going into a price battle or price war. So it's another benefit of that approach. But anything you can do that will shift the conversation and the dialogue towards value consideration, I think that's a win, and that's where you want to go.
I feel like there's no better spot for us to pause this conversation than right there. Please remember to focus on your value, not just the cost of the nuts and bolts to build the thing, but what are you doing that's changing the outcome for somebody that they're out there looking for what you have to sell anyway. Philippe Touzot is a genius. And I want to have you back to unpack this, because you're in a sweet spot for me where I love to talk about kind of the person and the product, and where do those two things intersect, and what are the priorities that are driving those things? Because I think that is the crux of what so many of us are in business are sort of dealing with, and it can get lost in all the conversations about so many things, and it's really like the lifeblood of the whole thing. And so I'm energized by this, and I'm so grateful for your expertise today. It's been a really interesting sort of breakdown of this stuff, and I think there's a lot more to unpack down the road.
All right. Thank you, Chris. It was fun.
Thanks for watching. And a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.